very much, Phil. When you say as much as we know, I did ask the archivist down in Colchester if he could provide us with some information about our castle, where it was, and he sadly said to me, well, it's all speculation and there's not much to say. So if I was to follow his advice, then you could all now go home, and I'm sure you'd be really pleased. Now, the last time I was down here was helping a gentleman defy bureaucracy, really, and he was down here with a big saw and he was sawing the back off his beecher. That was the last time I think this bit of the coast got any television or very much attention at all. But let's cut to the quick. Phil and I have been doing quite a number of visits to a number of different organisations, Chamber of Commerce, the Great and the Good, the Breakfast Club, and I have, and I think Phil have been asking all of these great and august bodies, where is Walton Castle? And what is extraordinary, these are bodies who we would have thought would have known our town quite well. They actually haven't got a clue where it is. Some suggest it may be up at Walton. Some say it might be down across into Essex, because that sounds pretty good and it's got a name Walton attached to it. I don't know why. It's stolen ours. We should get it back. And on that basis, we've looked at the Ordnance Survey map, which when I first came here actually showed Walton Castle off our coast. If you go and buy a new one, you'll be very disappointed, because for some strange reason it's been removed. So in future, our children and our visitors will have no idea at all that we ever had a castle, let alone where it actually is. So, see those three bits of rock out there? They are fundamentally the land side of a castle that sat on a cliff that was 100 feet in the air. So you really got to have a stretch of imagination to feel that you are now sort of standing in the foothills of a hill that will be going way up, and it would go on and out. And that's where the Romans built their castle, and it was a castle along with 10 others, Walton was the 11th, to protect our coast from the Saxons, who were probably from about the AD 240, 250, were starting to encroach and invade and do a little bit of raiding, really. It was a bit of round raiding at the weekend, get home to Norway or Denmark or whatever, and it actually beat working for a living. Now, what I've done, I've gone through and had a quick look at some geology for our coastline, and it's quite fascinating. Now, how does one hold a book and a microphone? Well done, excellent. On the front, you may see we've done a recent map showing all the Martello towers and where they were, because most of you know that we've lost sort of 3.5 Martello towers. O and S have gone to the sea, N went to the dock, and R is under the Bartlett carrying that noble building. If we could just turn some of these, Chris. The first item in this is actually a letter written by probably the best historian that our town has ever had. He was a gentleman called Samuel Wall, and he lived in Walton. He was a jeweller, and he wrote for our Felixstowe Times when it was very much a local paper from 1933 to 1944. He didn't actually die, I believe, until 1988, so he was 90 odd when he died, and he continued to work very much to the very end. So that was just a bit, because we will be commemorating him on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock outside of Susan's Flowers. These are drawings showing the River Thames when it used to empty itself out into the North Sea north of Norfolk. Now, I don't think any of you were alive then. I think it was about 450,000 years ago, so it was a while. But what we've had since then has been inundations of ice, which broke up the other basin, which was a basin called a Bittern, which was in the left-hand side, if you like, of the river exiting into the North Sea. That was completely changed when we had the glacier phase, which went on and on and on. We're very lucky. I mean, I'm particularly lucky because I come from Devon. And Devon never had this problem that you folk had here in East Anglia, because Dartmoor was never covered with ice, whereas most of this was covered with ice for year after year after year. And what it did, it actually moved the Thames further down and further down and further down. And eventually, if we quickly flip over these, you'll see that was the ice cover. This was before we broke through and we were still joined to that place over there. You didn't have to use either a plane or a ship. You could go and walk if you wished. In fact, our ancestors did. That was the face of the ice, the ground. That's what it used to look like. And this period is of particular relevance to us this coming Saturday, because we are going to do a little bit on the Beaker people that used to live in Chepstow Road. I don't know, do any of you remember the Beaker people that lived in Chepstow Road? None of you? Okay, well it was 4,000 years ago. So I doubt whether you actually knew any of them, but that was the period when Stonehenge was really bouncing. And it's now thought probably that Stonehenge was not just a religious site, but it was also a site in which medicine men would have been available. If you had the resources and you wanted to be fixed, actually it's not different to now. You would get yourself there, as we do now, don't we? If you've got an illness that current crop of local bodies can't do, then you spend your money and you go. And it would appear that may well have been what was happening for Stonehenge. It just wasn't a religious site. It was, you may have heard today, they found another huge stack of stuff, probably 7,000 or 8,000 years old, that they weren't aware of. So history happens every day, every minute, somewhere, because we undo what we thought we knew because it isn't right, because there's something else. And it's a continuous business, strikes me. Now, this is the bit that young Chris has got out for me. Sorry, can you have a look? Just take it up and down the front line, Chris, and we'll talk about it. If you look out here now, you can actually see, can't you, where the surf is hitting on that side. If you were to look right down there, you'd probably find something similar, but off Mersey, what you actually had were two big arms that extended out into the sea. This was several miles further into the sea. The Orwell didn't come out where it now comes. It actually came up probably north of the leisure centre and it headed towards here. The Deben would have been much bigger and wider, because if you remember, King actually assembled a fleet there, didn't he? And for him to have done that, there must have been more space than you see in the Deben. So it's probable that the Deben has actually silted somewhat over the years, whereas the Orwell, because they've reshaped it, is now a bigger river, and it's kept clear because it's fast enough, probably. But what you would have had, and you're going to envisage you've got this 100 foot hill plus, sitting out there, you put your castle on top of it, and you really are king of all you survey. So one would assume that this castle, which was there from around 340, certainly through until Henry VIII decided that he was going to concentrate on the Orwell and Harwich, because you may remember Henry VIII was supposedly the father of the Navy, and his dockyard, the one that he chose, was in Harwich. So if you're going to have a dockyard and you're going to have your ships, you really should defend them. So what he did, no expense spared, he got some earth sods, built up a bit of a surround, and I think he put in, was it 5 or 6 ordnances in to protect that particular landing stage, because to get into the water at Harwich, you've got to come in very close to Landguard, which is why it's always been a very tight control for that river. Whereas Deben has come down in usage, obviously the Orwell and the Store have come up. Now, this was built to stop the Saxons as best as they could, but the Roman Empire was falling to bits. The commander of this particular 11 castles and the navy that went with it was known as the Count of the Saxon Shore, and as you know, what tended to happen in the Roman Empire as it was sort of not falling to bits, but it changed, and if you had the means of actually grabbing to be the emperor, then you're in with a chance. And if we look at the turnover of emperors and emperors and emperors, it's not surprising that our guy Maximus decided he'd have a go as well, because he had a navy, he had all the forces, so he had a go to become emperor. And for a while he did. He was a usurped emperor for a couple of years, and then needless to say they got him on a dark night, and that was the end of him. In fact, I think trying to be a Roman emperor was a pretty unsavoury job. I think I'd have passed up on it. Anyway, as you all know, the Romans gave notice to us that pretty much as a result of they'd lost the art of fighting, that they were going to pack up their bags and leave us to it. And I think they did that in about 404, 406. They packed up sticks and went, but before they'd done that, the folks that were manning most of the frontier post were pretty much like Dad's army, really. They didn't have the money, they certainly didn't have the control that they'd had, and they had 3 streams of military forces. There were, if you like, the Dad's army, you had the regular army, and then you had the SAS. And the SAS protected the emperor, providing he could pay them enough and keep them on side. They left the fort or the castle, and one thing that I've been seeking and have yet to get an answer, and hopefully in a couple of years time we might know, I've been up to Sutton Hoo and other Saxon places and said it makes no sense at all that you had sitting down at the junction of your river this massive castle, and I think there is a photograph of there it is. So that, I mean, it is a substantive castle. It's certainly not small fry. That when the Danes came, or sorry, the Saxons came, and that they obviously had a large estate living up in Woodbridge. They had a town in Ipswich. Surely this particular castle, which would then still been in fine fettle, must have been garrisoned to protect the Saxon settlements that were on the coast. So we actually, if we listen to the advice we received from the Colchester Museum, you guys wouldn't be here tonight. You'd be at home in bed or sitting somewhere warm, and you would undoubtedly not know that those three little rocks out there are all that remains of what was a substantive castle. You probably wouldn't have known that this whole coastline was very much like that, with the castle right in the middle of it. So I think that will conclude, ladies and gentlemen. It's got a bit cold. I told Phil we wouldn't go past 15 minutes, and we've gone past 20. Sorry? Yes, we can mention the figures if you want. I mean, the poor guy, he signed up with William to come across again and do a bit of weekend foraging and damage. And he came with William, as you know, a arrow hit a guy in the eye, and that was the end of that, pretty much. And as a reward for this trip that this guy made, a guy called Bigot, he was rewarded with 117 manors. Not bad, really, for a weekend's work and getting out there and doing a bit. And one of those was Walton. Now, Walton was certainly one of the biggest, because it was all of this peninsula pretty much. And within it, over time, it effectively nearly had a palace at Walton Hall. It had a significant priory, which was behind St Mary's. I don't know if you go behind St Mary's, Attica Road, underneath that ground is the priory that was associated with Walton. He had a son, I think it was William, who died, I believe, on the White Ship with the would-be king, and that meant that a guy called Hugh inherited the estate. Now, Hugh, sadly, was a bit of a rebel. In fact, he was a lot of a rebel. He was big trouble, and I think at the end of it, he was a part, oddly, of the Magna Carta. So this time next year, hopefully, we'll be able to show you his signature on a facsimile of the Magna Carta, and we'll continue the story. Thank you very much.